Welcome to Coast Vue, the show that every single day celebrates the men and women who are making coastal Mississippi such an amazing place to live, work, and play. You gotta love this weather, man. We have some rain, and then we have a little cool front, and then it's starting to heat up again. And I've been working out in the yard. You know, the grass is growing greener, and the flowers are blooming. Man, it's just spring in Coast Mississippi is just absolutely beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Hey, listen, if you missed a show, yesterday's show, I want to really bring your attention to it. I had Steve Davenport, the owner of SuperTalk Mississippi Media, and sort of my partner in this effort. I've really enjoyed working with them on strategic stuff, and really, honestly, it's been fun for me. The opportunity to be engaged, and of course, you know, over 800 shows that Kyle and I have done together for Coast Vue, and now SuperTalk Outdoors. What great support they've been to us. And Steve has a very interesting story, a very compelling story, very interesting story. And he's from Pascagoula. So here's this guy that's built this behemoth of a media company in Mississippi with 26 radio stations, and he's from Pascagoula. It's a great story. So if you missed it, you can go to SuperTalk, the Coast Vue Ricky Matthews page, the SuperTalk Gulf Coast page, or SuperTalk Mississippi page, or just go to your favorite. And we're on all the favorite platforms. With that said, let me move on over to my dear friend, Jeff Duncan, because this is Friday on Coast Vue, and this is the time we get the opportunity to visit with my buddy. How you doing, Jeff?
I'm doing great, Ricky. You're right, man. This weather kind of lifts the mood, doesn't it?
It does, man. It's great. I mean, I loved, let's tell you, one of the things about living in the warehouse district when I was in New Orleans is I really miss this. I would run through the Harrah's courtyard area,
yep,
and on down past the aquarium and down to the river, and just run down the river. And people say, "What, did you feel safe doing that?" Of course I did. I never felt unsafe, and I did it every single day for years. It was an awesome run, but it's a beautiful time of year just to walk along the river, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a great run. Every once in a while, I have like my own run into Audubon Park. I live uptown near Tulane University, but as you know, being a runner, I mean, you got to mix it up every once in a while. So I love that run. That's one of my favorite ones, all the way down along the river toward like the Marigny and that area. And then there's another one that I mix it up. I'll go out to the lakefront, and that's an area of town that not a lot of people get to, but man, it's a beautiful run right there along Lake Pontchartrain.
Oh man, a levee and all. I mean, it's just it's well done. It makes for a good run. I mean, oftentimes I'll run early in the morning. Let's say early 6 o'clock or so. I'd run through the French Quarter, and some mornings, you would think it would be kind of no big deal. People, be out the streets, but boy, you get into some of the entertainment areas, and some people are just now headed back to their hotels. So.
Well, Ricky, I'll tell you, that's one of my favorite things to do, and I recommend it to all my friends or family that come to town. Go to the Quarter early in the morning. It's a whole different vibe. It's beautiful. I mean, you really appreciate the architecture. It's quiet for the most part. You're right. There's some pockets, but for the most part, it's just a different vibe, and I love doing that in the morning. Go maybe get some beignets, get some coffee, and just walk around, and you get to explore that maybe you miss that when all the people are down there at night.
Yeah, hey, listen, I ran a 5K last Saturday. My entire family did. I actually did a post about it on the Coast Vue site, but my granddaughter, who is under awesome treatment from a specialist at Ochsner in New Orleans. In fact, we were there last week getting an update. She has pretty severe scoliosis, and she's got to wear a brace 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, and she will have to. She's only 7, so she'll have to until she's at least 15 or 16 years old in order to avoid what is really difficult radical surgery that sometimes is required in this case. But if you were to meet Riley, Jeff, you'd be so impressed. She's a kid that is so full of life and has such a spirit. She hasn't let that, having to wear that brace stop her in any way. She ran an 8-minute mile. She's only a 7-year-old, man.
Wow.
I mean, for runners, that's for a really seasoned runner, they say that's my training speed. But for a 7-year-old that doesn't have a stride, maybe a stride half of your stride, 8 minutes. I was so happy. I mean, she came across that finish line. Her face was red, and she just said, "Papa, I just wanted to win." I just wanted to win. I mean, the spirit of that was incredible. So my whole family was inspired. Everybody either ran the 5K or the 1 mile, and I won my age division. But
Nice.
I joked that I actually have done that many times. But when you're 65, there's not a lot of people my age, unfortunately, that are running like I do. But I joked at people that had my age wrong. You look on the back of the car because it's all computer driven now, man. They got scan cards behind it, got your name and age and numbers, and they put you in the computer. Literally one moment they put you in the computer, it gets you your time, and it's very fancy the way they do those runs now. But anyway, it's fun. It's fun to get out and do that. And I checked my Nike app before I left New Orleans, and I had run over 1,000 miles in New Orleans before I left there, just running, doing that run down the river and through the French Quarter and all that. It was, I really miss that actually. It's a special place.
Well, we got the Crescent City Classic coming up here on Easter weekend, and that's obviously a huge event. And I've been 50-50, Ricky, on whether I'm going to participate and run this year, but I think I'm going to do it. I've been running more and getting back into it, and it's just such a fun community event. Great day with all, classic New Orleans, people running in outfits and costumes and bands playing along the route. To me, it's one of my favorite weekends and one of my favorite events in the city. So I think I'm going to dive back in while I can still do it before I get, too to run these things.
Right, and it's people as it always is the case in New Orleans. This diversity of fun. It plays out in different ways, but at the same time, the Crescent City Classic has become a very serious competition as well. So there's some, world-class runners that come and run in that, and it's amazing the times that they're able to log, and they're really it's on the map. It's on the map for most major running organizations or people in this region. They want to go be part of that, don't they?
I don't think people truly appreciate how fast those elite runners are. Or appreciate how hard it is to do what they do. It's hard for us to wrap our brains around it unless you run a lot and just see how effortlessly they glide and how fast they do it over a long period of time. The combination of endurance and speed is mind-boggling to me, and I've run my whole life. So to see them, I have a true appreciation for that elite athleticism.
Yeah, there's no doubt. There's no doubt. Okay, so look, Saints they're not done. It's been dynamic watching them. I've been, as I mentioned to you also, by the way, and we'll get to this before we get to the end. I've signed up for some of the key media organizations in Denver, so I've been watching the flurry of activity around reporting what Sean Payton is up to. There's a huge love affair going down there. You know that, don't you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he had a huge, every yeyear they have the NFL owners meetings this time of year. It bounces back and forth between the East Coast and the West Coast. We're back out in the Biltmore in Phoenix. If anybody's ever been to that beautiful hotel in Phoenix, that's a popular destination. And that was this past week. And that's why you saw a lot of news coming out about the NFL. And Sean, one of the events they have, Ricky, at that event every year is they have a breakfast one day with the AFC head coaches, and all the media meets the AFC head coaches. They have tables set up, each coach at a table. And then the next day they do the NFC coaches. And Sean Payton's table was just overwhelmed with reporters from the Denver area. Of course, it's not that far from Colorado. So that was another chance for them to get, some airtime with Sean Payton. And you're right. I haven't seen anything like it. There's so much enthusiasm in the Denver market, and rightfully so. And he brought back Joe Vitt, a former Saints assistant who'd been retired for a number of years, brought him back out of retirement to be his consigliere on the staff. So it's going to be fun to watch how that plays out in Denver.
Ooh, man, it really is. And, it's interesting. There are few coaches in the NFL that could say, well, we are playing tackle football, so we are actually going to tackle in practice, and that would make huge headlines,
Right.
But what he's coming in, he's coming in behind a guy who really didn't have a good system. And it was clear Denver Broncos were headed in the wrong direction, and he's literally rebuilding that. He's bringing spirit back. He's doing all the things he did here, putting the focus on the offensive line. And, we don't want to overdo it because at the end of the day, we want him to be successful, but we don't want him to be a barn burner as well.
Right. Well, I'll tell you, they wanted to hire a CEO type head coach. They'd gone down the route of hiring assistants and it hadn't worked out. And the guy that preceded him, Nathaniel Hackett, is a very well-respected coach. It just goes to show you, Ricky, there's a difference between being a really good football coach and being a very good head coach.
Yeah.
And Hackett is going to end up having a long, successful career as an assistant coach in the NFL. But being a head coach, you need to have vision. You need to have leadership skills. You got to have your finger on the pulse of everything. And Sean Payton's the best I've ever seen at that.
I know. Listen, and he's really comfortable in his own skin, and he's gotten more so. Maybe the network gig even really helped him, because he was pretty awkward at the beginning, but toward the end of the season, he was actually finding his stride. One other point I want to make about Sean Payton when we get on the other side, and then we'll talk about some more pickups by the Saints and sort of where the Saints are sitting today. But when we come back with my friend Jeff Duncan from NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune, we'll continue the conversation. Welcome back to Coast Vue. I have my friend Jeff Duncan from NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune, and I'm looking at my buddy Kyle like I'm always looking at Kyle. Kyle, say good morning to everybody.
Good morning, everybody.
Man, we had, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, I had Steve Davenport, the owner of SuperTalk, but everybody sings Kyle's praises because he is such a jack of all trades in this company and so important to this company. And I would not be here doing the show if it weren't for Kyle. So, as usual, Kyle, thank you so much, my friend.
You bet. You bet.
Yeah. So, coming back to my buddy Jeff, one other point I wanted to make. Again, I think that Sean Payton has really gotten comfortable in his own skin more so, and maybe, as I pointed out, the network gig helped him. I think I mentioned this to you, but a couple of years ago when he was still with the Saints, I was at a fundraiser for St. Patrick High School. And this happened to be actually when Sean had the entire coaching staff at the Beau Rivage, and they were doing one of their off-site strategic planning sessions. And we didn't know it. They happened to be in a room across the way, and they were deep in whatever. I think he came out to just go to the restroom, actually, and he saw all this was going on, and he asked somebody, what's going on? And he said, well, this is a fundraiser that's going on for St. Patrick High School and blah, blah, blah. And he literally didn't go back into the room. He immediately goes into the St. Patrick thing, says, you mind if I go to the stage? Yes. He goes to the stage, and he offers up this package of, going to watch some practice, tickets to the game, all on a whim, man, just in the moment. And of course, they did an auction and made a lot of money, but he did that, gave his name and number to whoever and said that, they'll take care of this. And then he said, thank you very much. He walks out of the room and goes back into his meeting.
That sounds like Sean Payton.
Isn't that cool, though?
Yeah, he's got that kind of ability, charisma, and he likes doing those kind of things. I've seen him. Yeah. I've seen him in restaurants in New Orleans. Just walk over, somebody come up to his table and say hi with their family and get a photo, and then he'll comp the meal for the entire family, without them even knowing it, without even wanting, attention about it. He just does it and leaves the restaurant on his own, tells the waiter. He does a lot of things like that. He's definitely a special person and a special coach. The thing I was just mentioning the other day, the thing I appreciated about Sean, and you talked about him getting comfortable in his own skin. Maybe it's because he had security here, and learned that he could say this, but he was willing to admit when he made mistakes. You don't see that a lot, especially at the high levels, because there's so much pressure on these coaches, and they're coaching for their jobs all the time. But he would admit all the time that when they messed up, if he made a bad play call, or made a bad personnel decision, and you learn to appreciate that when you're covering it. And I wish more coaches, more leaders would be willing to do that.
Yeah, you have to be willing to admit your mistakes. Let's talk about our coach. Of course, Dennis Allen's out at that same meeting, and some news had been coming out from him. He actually gave a report on the latest health issue as it relates to Michael Thomas. And what was your read on that?
Well, I was a little surprised that he's still not 100%, but they don't need him right now, so it's not a big deal. They expect him to be full go for training camp. I'm sure he's going to work his way back in this offseason, I think even at the mini camps. So, it's been an ongoing issue with Mike Thomas. That's why his contract that got renegotiated is basically incentive laden. If he stays healthy and catches a lot of balls and is very productive, he'll make a lot of money. And if he's not, the team is protected by the contract because it's all based on incentives. So we'll see. It's a big year for Mike Thomas because of these injuries. And for the Saints, it's kind of a low-risk potentially high reward opportunity to bring him back. I think the Saints have done a lot of kind of roster plugging, but I think they still got some work to do, and they both indicated that, Mickey Loomis and Dennis Allen. They're not done yet. This is kind of the third level of the market of free agency, so they'll be adding some more names. I mean, they brought Brian Edwards in, who was a former receiver, worked with Derek Carr in Las Vegas with the Raiders, but he's bounced around a lot. This is what I was telling you last week, is the guys you're bringing in now, they're kind of depth-type players, right? Brian Edwards came into the league from South Carolina, very well thought of, third-round draft pick, but is just not really caught on. He's had some injuries, been cut a lot. I mean, he's been released like by 3 different teams in the last year or so. So that should tell you right there, you're not getting a world beater, right? I mean, but if he stays healthy, he's a big, strong guy, very similar type player to Mike Thomas, and that he's not going to run away from players, but he can catch contested balls. Gives him some insurance in case Mike Thomas does go down.
We did have, he had a couple of good years with the Raiders, and of course, he didn't even need to do any research on Derek Carr, as he said, and you guys reporting that he came here because he knew what the chemistry was going to be like. He knew the kind of culture that Derek Carr is going to create. So you bring him in and you lose Callaway. You know, the way I'm viewing it, you know, I don't know that we lost much. I think maybe we have a net gain in that transaction. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think they're very similar players. I don't think you're going to, you know, I think it's going to be almost identical in a lot of ways. I mean, these guys they're bringing in at this point are depth for depth, and you need good depth. I mean, you're going to have injuries. Every team in the league goes through it. Certainly, Saints fans know the problem with injuries. So at this stage, you're bringing guys in mainly on minimum level contracts, and really they're starting to turn their attention to the NFL draft. I mean, last week, before the owners' meetings, Dennis Allen, Jeff Ireland, Mickey Loomis were all out on the road. They were at Alabama Pro Days, Ohio State Pro Days. I think this week they have Florida Pro Day down in Gainesville. So there's a lot of travel and a lot of attention to the NFL draft looking, it's going to be here before you know it. And they've got to look at the college prospects now more so than the pro prospects.
Hey, I read another mock draft last night, and this particular one, it's not necessarily different from everything else you're reading, but man, it was defensive line, and more defensive line. I mean, that must be where a lot of their focus is in these trips.
Well, and look, I think the reason a lot of that also is coming up is because if you look at how the draft falls this year, you have a lot of defensive line prospects that are going to be available where the Saints are picking. Like they're going to be in the late first round, early second round type of grade. So it makes sense. You're going to take the best player on the board, more than likely could be a defensive lineman, especially, I think, in the interior defensive line. They almost drafted Brandon Davis last year in the first round. Dennis Allen really liked him out of Georgia. He ended up going to the Philadelphia Eagles. So it just shows you, I mean, Dennis Allen believes in bolstering the lines just like Sean Payton did. And they've got some work to do, I think, on the defensive line. They've lost a lot of defensive players in that front seven. So that's an area I think they'll concentrate on.
You know, one of the things I'm interested in, I saw a listing. I don't even remember what the order of the list was, but I saw a listing. It showed the top players from the 2022 draft, and then it showed how they performed last year in order, the top 10, and then where they were taken in the draft. And it's so interesting to see that because sometimes they got it right, and sometimes, man, there were some big-time bargains later in the draft. It's interesting to see what the perception is and all this research leads you to do, and then what the actual outcome is. It never plays out the way they expect it to, does it?
No, I mean, if you redrafted 2017, I mean, Alvin Kamara would go in the top 15 picks, and the Saints drafted him in the third round. So, yeah, and that's where I think the Saints really have an advantage over the rest of the league. Their college scouting department's excellent, led by Jeff Ireland. I think he's as good as anyone in the league, and I think he needs to be because the Saints have to have a big draft this year. They really need to hit. I thought their draft last year turned out a lot better than a lot of people thought. Penning's going to end up being a starter at left tackle. Obviously, Chris Olave was a star. Alante Taylor's going to end up being a very good corner. So they got a lot of production out of that draft. Rashid Shaheed wasn't even in the draft, and he's a key player for them. They need another draft like that with production.
Jeff, isn't it amazing, though? Shaheed, We didn't even know how to say that word. And now it literally just rolls off our tongue. He became so relevant so fast. And they don't think that was just a blip on the screen. They believe this kid can be part of the core receiver group. That's incredible that he was just available and didn't even get drafted.
Yeah, look, it happens every year. I mean, look, Taysom Hill was not drafted. Look how good a player he is, right? I mean, he's one of the top players on the Saints offense. And the Saints plucked him out of the waiver wire after he didn't get drafted by the Packers. You find gems in there every year. Matter of fact, I'm doing a list right now. I mean, Juwan Johnson now just signed a new contract, a 2-year, $12 million deal. He wasn't drafted either. He's going to be the Saints starting tight end for the future. That's why they work so hard at trying to uncover these guys late in the draft. And I think Jeff Ireland and his staff are as good as anybody. And so, and they need to be, because we've talked about their salary cap issues. It's only going to keep getting worse these next couple of years as they keep trying to go all in. So they need to have players on rookie contracts at that low salary wage to balance out the roster when you've got big name players like Cam Jordan, DeMario Davis making big money.
Well, you think about Juwan Johnson. I have these visions of Graham, because he's got good hands. He's tall. He really has become a dominant player, hasn't he?
Yeah, and I think he's only going to get better. I mean, he's just been playing tight end a year and a half, so he's going to keep getting better. He puts his work in. That's the kind of guy you reward with a contract like the Saints did.
No doubt. Hey, this has been Jeff Duncan. Jeff, thank you so much, my friend.
Yeah, anytime, Ricky. Everybody have a great weekend. We'll talk next week, buddy.
Hey, go to NOLA.com and sign up for that Saints newsletter. You'll be glad you did. We'll see you after the break.